Now, people who know me will know that I'm not a great fan of Nigel Farage, but at the same time, I think he's a major player on our national stage, and he is responsible, really, for the Brexit progress. He's responsible for, recently, getting banks to look again at their activities, and he's drawn attention to the very crafty ways banks are behaving at the moment. Now, maybe it's not enough to change their behaviour, but it certainly pulled the spotlight onto very, very bad bank practices. And today he was in Downing Street delivering a petition which has been organised by him, by GB News, by other people in that particular sphere. And again, I'm not endorsing GB News here. I'm simply saying it doesn't matter who you are. Speaking out, speaking with a voice, protesting. To protest is to speak loudly, to literally to shout. I protest my innocence is a really good example of the true meaning of that word. It's not to object to something, it's to shout and to make your opinion, your news, known. That's why Protestants are called Protestants, because they shout the Bible. And often get into trouble for it. But Don't Kill Cash, I think, is a great protest movement, and it's very important. And millions are affected by the disintegration of the cash system. You go into a shop and don't take cash. And you think, well, what can I do? I don't have a card with me. My card got trapped in the washing machine, and now it's not working properly. So what do? I just have to leave the shop. I go to the cinema, and I want to get some popcorn. I can't because they're a cashless cinema, and I didn't bring my card with me. Well, this is a sort of nonsensical system because I'm just simply going to go away. I'm quite happy to go off and read a book or do something else. I've got plenty of ways to occupy my time if shops and cinemas and restaurants are not going to take my money. And Nigel Farage was received at number 11 in Downing Street. Very good, a great moment with a petition signed by 300,000 people. Not a great number of people. I think we could have got a bigger group of people, but enough to make a noise. And we've got a problem with the erosion of cash, and also the threat by Rishi Sunak and others that we could end up with a cashless society that is mandatory, that we are forced into a position where we become a cashless society rather than a matter of choice. As a matter of choice, we want to use Bitcoin, we want to do a transaction on the computer, or we want to take cash into the bank. Now we're told there's a limit to how much cash we can take into the bank. And part of this is about the banks planning, the Bank of England and various companies, organisations planning a form of digital currency that can be monitored and controlled. Maybe initially that's not going to happen, but that mechanism is there to control us at some future date. We can't be sure how the government uses the tools which is setting in motion at the moment, and these tools are very dangerous tools and need to be opposed. Yes, choice is great, but cash is also a central part of our society, our system, our identity. And indeed, one of the big arguments about Brexit was about keeping the pound rather than surrendering to the euro. If you've got a cashless society, who gives a damn whether it's a pound or a euro? It's not in your pocket, is it? It's not got the king's image on one side of the note. It's just a concept, and we're getting to the same situation with stamps. If Royal Mail doesn't work, and it demonstrably does not work anymore, what's the point of stamps? Because they're not used by these other organisations, DHL and Amazon Prime or whatever these organisations, UPS. They don't use stamps. what's the point of a stamp? What is the point? We're losing that currency because our government isn't invested enough in preserving something that goes back to the penny black and has, 100 odd years of history and very interesting and vital history. And it takes us back to the time before we have stamps, and the urgency to get mail through and how difficult that was. Remember, one of the first things that made Florence Nightingale so important was not her obsessive cleaning, though of course she was an obsessive cleaner, but her desire to make sure that soldiers who were dying or severely ill in the Scutari hospital in Constantinople, in Istanbul, that they could receive letters from their family, and those letters were then sort of folded over and sealed and were often read to the dying patients by the nurses, by Florence Nightingale's nurses. That was one thing that they could do. An early postal system. And then we got to a point where we had a really good postal system with 2 deliveries at least per day, and now we can barely get one. And cash is going in the same direction. What can we rely on if we can't rely on the mail, and we can't rely on cash, and we can't rely on the NHS, and we can't rely on education because the education minister thinks that the benchmark exam is not important? What can we rely on in this country? Because we can't rely on the government either.